There is talk of Turkey building a military base in Azerbaijan, which is a country that borders southern Russia. And what is the problem with this? Well, Turkey is a NATO nation, so this would be NATO basically building a military base on Russia's borders. If Russia was doing this to the United States, for example, we could only imagine the hysteria that would follow. And let's take a look at this Reuters article. Russia monitoring talk of Turkish military base in Azerbaijan, says Kremlin. And they're talking about this comment Erdogan of Turkey made about a possible military base in Azerbaijan. And of course, Reuters tries to pretend that this is just Russia being paranoid about its sphere of influence being encroached on by a nation like Turkey that belongs to NATO. But of course, there is much more to this entire story. Let's take a look at this article from last year. Turkish-backed Syrian fighters join Armenian-Azeri conflict. There was actually a war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Russia was kind of backing Armenia, and Turkey, a NATO member, was backing Azerbaijan. Part of Turkey's involvement in that conflict was flying in hundreds of Syrian mercenaries allied with Turkey. They were straining relations between Ankara and Moscow. And of course, these are Syrian mercenaries that Russia is fighting in Syria, and now they're on Russia's border, essentially. So you could see what the problem is with this. And here's a little bit more background. Across the border from Azerbaijan in Russia is the Caucasus region, Chechnya, where Russia fought two very destructive conflicts with separatists in Chechnya who were backed by the US. And that was part of the collapse of the Soviet Union and America's attempt to keep Russia off balance as it reemerged as a global power. From the BBC, Russia's Putin, US agents gave direct help to Chechens, and obviously they did. The US was backing militants in Afghanistan to fight the Soviets there. Why wouldn't the US also help militants inside of Russia, militants with connections to extremists in Afghanistan? Of course they did. And if we go to Russia Matters, which is Western disinformation out of Harvard's Belfer Center, even they admit that it's at least partially correct. Claim in 2004, 2015, and 2017, the US government supported Chechen separatism, and they're saying, yes, it's partially correct. And if you go through here, it's very obvious the US had connections to the top leadership of the Chechen separatists and terrorists, by the way. They were terrorists, and they were backing them, just like they're backing the Syrian terrorists that Russia is fighting in Syria right now. When the US engineered the Arab Spring, the whole point of that was to create an arc of chaos, collapse the governments in the region, install client regimes that would create a united front against Iran, collapse the government in Iran, and then take this huge army of mercenary terrorists and just flood southern Russia with them. And at the same time, they were doing that pivot toward Asia, where they were going to start doubling down on trying to encircle and contain China by likewise destabilizing the governments along China's peripheries, countries like Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia. Let's look at this from The Atlantic. This is from late 2011. The Arab Spring, a virus that will attack Moscow and Beijing. And of course, they're talking about US Senator John McCain, who said that it was a virus that was going to attack Moscow and Beijing. And if we just come down here, McCain said, a year ago, Ben Ali and Gaddafi were not in power. Assad won't be in power this time next year. This Arab Spring is a virus that will attack Moscow and Beijing. And of course, if you go to these US corporate-funded policy think tanks, this is all they've talked about for decades. This is the process of encircling and containing Russia and China. And before Russia, the Soviet Union, all of these dirty wars, color revolutions, political subversion along their borders and within their borders. So the point is, this war just last year between Azerbaijan and Armenia we saw Turkey bring those terrorists from Syria that they were using to fight the Syrian government, and they put them right on Russia's border. They were fighting this conflict, and they might still be there. And we could only imagine what would have happened if the US was a little more successful and quicker in collapsing the government of Syria, and was able to keep the momentum going, overthrow the government in Iran, and what that mercenary army would have looked like on Russia's borders had things been different. And now we can see why Russia is so committed to defeating terrorism in Syria. It's because if they didn't, if Syria fell, that horde of terrorists that the US and its allies created would have just been brought right over to Russia's borders and then into southern Russia. And then Russia would be fighting them inside Russia. And they would have a third Chechen war to worry about. And this was all part of pressuring Russia and China to subordinate themselves to the so-called international order the US claims it is the leader of. And so this is why Russia is concerned about a Turkish military base being on their border in Azerbaijan. It's not because just Turkey, it's because Turkey's role in the proxy war, the dirty war against Syria, the use of these terrorists as mercenaries that Turkey has been sending anywhere they need them. And the likelihood of them eventually crossing into Russian territory is still very high. I would not discount it. And so we have to watch this very closely. This is not just an obscure news story. Reuters is deliberately downplaying the significance of this. This is actually a very significant news item. So please keep an eye on this and keep all of this information in mind as things unfold regarding this story. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing. It's free to do, and it helps the channel grow. Look in the video description for all of these links. Also in the video description are ways you can help support my work, like becoming a Patreon member. You can support my work month to month. You get a little bit of extra content, and there are lines of communication where we can all kind of talk to each other and build a community around this work. To everyone everywhere helping me in absolutely every way, thank you so much. I could not do this work without that support. And as always, thank you for watching.